Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. For Mark Anderson, that test came on a rain-slicked highway just hours before his custody hearing. Through sheets of rain, he spots the overturned car, flames already licking at its frame. Without hesitation, he plunges into the inferno, his heart stopping when he sees the small figure in the back seat. As his burned hands fumble with the seatbelt, he knows only one thing: no child deserves to die alone. What he doesn't know is that tomorrow in courtroom 7B, this moment will change everything, because the judge about to decide his son's fate. She's the mother of the boy he just saved. How far would you go to save a stranger's child, knowing it might cost you everything you hold dear? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mark Anderson's alarm chirped at 5:45 a.m., though he'd been awake since 5, staring at the water stains on his bedroom ceiling. The custody hearing loomed tomorrow, and sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford. He rolled over, his feet finding the cold hardwood floor of the modest two-bedroom apartment he'd called home since the divorce. The familiar creak of the hallway floorboards accompanied his morning ritual. First, coffee, the cheap store brand that stretched his budget. Then Tommy's lunch, peanut butter and honey on wheat, apple slices cut thin the way Tommy liked them, and a note sketched with the stick figures they'd been drawing for each other since Tommy first started kindergarten. Through the thin walls, he heard his son's gentle breathing from the next room. Tommy always slept deeply, just like his mother used to. The thought of Jennifer brought a familiar ache, but Mark pushed it aside. Today wasn't about old wounds. It was about making sure. Tommy had everything he needed. The custody case file sat on the kitchen counter, a manila folder stuffed with 3 years of his life reduced to court transcripts and evaluations. His lawyer, Dan Mitchell, had highlighted the relevant sections in neon yellow. Limited financial resources, irregular work schedule, history of late child support payments. Each phrase felt like an indictment, but they didn't tell the whole story. They didn't show the nights Mark spent helping Tommy with multiplication tables, or the weekends they spent building model airplanes together, or how he'd picked up extra carpentry jobs to keep Tommy in his advanced science program. "Dad?" Tommy's voice, still thick with sleep, pulled Mark from his thoughts. The boy stood in the doorway, dark hair wild from sleep, clutching the stuffed penguin he pretended he'd outgrown. "Hey, buddy," Mark smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You're up early. Couldn't sleep?" Tommy shuffled to the kitchen table, his Captain America pajamas slightly too short at the ankles. "Is today the important day?" Mark poured a glass of milk, buying time before answering. "Tomorrow's the important day. Today's just regular Tuesday. Mum says I might live with her all the time after." Tommy's voice wavered slightly. "I don't want to, Dad." The glass clinked too hard against the table as Mark set it down. "Hey, look at me." He knelt beside Tommy's chair, meeting eyes that mirrored his own. "Whatever happens tomorrow, nothing changes between us. You're my co-pilot, remember?" Tommy nodded, but his lower lip trembled. "Promise? Cross my heart." Mark drew an X over his chest, their private ritual since Tommy was 4. "Now how about some breakfast? We've got time for pancakes." They fell into their familiar morning dance, Tommy measuring flour while Mark heated the griddle, both humming off-key to the oldies station that crackled through the kitchen radio. For a moment, Mark could almost forget about the stack of bills in his desk drawer, the approaching custody hearing, the constant fear of losing what mattered most. The pancakes were slightly burned on one side, but Tommy declared them perfect. As they ate, Mark watched his son meticulously cut his pancakes into identical squares, a habit he'd developed in first grade. These were the details that kept Mark awake at night. Would Jennifer notice how Tommy needed his food separated on the plate? Would she remember that Wednesday was astronomy club, that Tommy needed his inhaler before soccer practice, that he still liked a nightlight even though he wouldn't admit it? "Dad!" Tommy's voice pulled him back again. Can we work on the treehouse this weekend? The treehouse, their ongoing project, built from reclaimed wood Mark salvaged from his job sites. It was already more elaborate than he'd planned, with a trapdoor and a pulley system for hoisting up supplies. You bet, kiddo. I picked up some great cedar planks for the roof last week. Tommy's face lit up, and Mark felt the familiar surge of determination. He'd figure out the money somehow. He'd make the custody payments on time. He'd prove to the court what he knew in his heart, that there was nothing more important to him than being Tommy's father. As they finished breakfast, sunlight finally broke through the morning clouds, casting long shadows across their small kitchen. Tommy gathered his backpack, carefully tucking away the lunch Mark had made. At the door, he paused. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy? We're gonna be okay, right?" Mark pulled his son close, breathing in the scent of syrup and sleep-warm hair. "Yeah, Tommy, we're gonna be just fine." The old Victorian on Maple Street had seen better days. Mark ran his hand along the intricate crown molding, feeling the history beneath decades of paint. Rich people hired him to restore these grand old houses, never knowing he sometimes slept in his truck between payments to afford Tommy's school supplies. Today's job was replacing rotted wood in the library's bay window, the kind of detailed work that usually calmed his mind. His phone buzzed. Dan Mitchell's number. Mark stepped onto the front porch, sawdust falling from his clothes. "Tell me. Something good, Dan." Jennifer's lawyer submitted Tommy's latest report card. His lawyer's voice carried a rare note of optimism. "Straight A's in everything except PE. Teacher comments are gold. Engaged. Helpful. Shows remarkable improvement." "This helps us, Mark." Mark closed his eyes, remembering the hours spent at the kitchen table, working through math problems, practicing vocabulary. He's a smart kid. Just needed someone to believe in him. "The court looks for stability. These grades show you're providing that." A pause. "But Jennifer's filing included some photos of your apartment. They're pushing hard on the living conditions angle." The familiar weight settled back onto Mark's shoulders. His apartment wasn't fancy, but it was clean. Safe. Tommy had his own room, decorated with the solar system mobile they'd built together. "What are our chances, really? Be early tomorrow. Wear your blue suit. And Mark, no surprises. Judge Chen's a stickler for protocol." The call ended, and Mark returned to his work, losing himself in the rhythm of careful restoration. Around noon, his phone buzzed again. A text from Tommy's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. "Tommy shared his science project today. His presentation on renewable energy was impressive. You should be proud." Attached was a photo of Tommy, standing beside his wind turbine model, beaming with pride. Mark saved it immediately, his throat tight. They'd spent 3 weekends on that project, scrounging parts from Mark's workshop, staying up late to get the calculations right. The afternoon brought storm clouds and another call, this time from Jennifer. "Mark." Her voice was clipped, professional, the tone she'd adopted since the divorce. "Tommy forgot his inhaler at your place. It's in the front pocket of his backpack. I checked before he left." A long pause. "The court date's tomorrow." "I know. I'm not trying to be the bad guy here. I just want what's best for him." Mark watched the storm gathering outside the bay window. "So do I, Jen. That's all I've ever wanted. You're 3 months behind on support payments. I'll catch up. The Peterson job pays next week, and I've got 2 more lined up after that. He needs stability, Mark, a real home, not—" She trailed off. "Not what? Not a father who works with his hands? Not our apartment that's small but full of love? Tell me, Jen, what doesn't he need?" Thunder rolled in the distance as Jennifer sighed. "I have to go. Just don't be late tomorrow." The rest of the afternoon blurred by. Mark finished the window restoration as rain began to fall, fat drops darkening the ancient wood. His phone lit up with a text from Tommy. "Dad, I got an A on my presentation. Can we get pizza to celebrate?" Mark smiled despite everything. "You bet, champ. Pick you up at 6. Proud of you." He packed his tools methodically, checking each one, a habit from watching his own father work years ago. The old tool belt had been his dad's last gift before the cancer took him. Now it helped Mark build a life for Tommy, one careful repair at a time. The Victorian's owner appeared as Mark was loading his truck. "Beautiful work," she said, running her fingers along the restored molding. "Simply beautiful. You have a real gift." If only the court could see him through her eyes, not as a struggling single father behind on payments, but as a craftsman, a man who understood that sometimes the most valuable things were those you rebuilt with patience and care. The rain intensified as Mark climbed into his truck. Tomorrow's hearing felt like a wave building on the horizon, threatening to wash away everything he'd worked for. But tonight he had pizza plans with his son. Tonight they'd celebrate straight A's and science projects and the small victories that made up their life together. He turned the key and the old truck grumbled to life. The storm was getting worse, but Mark knew these roads. He'd make it to Tommy's school on time. He always did. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour as Mark navigated the familiar route to Tommy's school. Local radio crackled through the speakers. Severe weather warning for the greater metropolitan area. Heavy rainfall and wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour expected through the evening hours. His phone rang through the truck's ancient speakers. Tommy again. Mark pressed the answer button on his steering wheel, one of the few modern features he'd managed to install. "Hey, buddy, I'm on my way." "Dad?" Tommy's voice sounded small. "I had that dream again." Mark's grip tightened on the wheel. The dream had started after the divorce. Tommy alone in dark water, trying to reach a distant light. Their therapist said it was normal, a manifestation of anxiety about the separation. "You're safe, Tommy. Remember what we talked about. Count backwards from 10 and think about the treehouse." "That's right. I'm about 15 minutes away. Want to tell me more about your presentation?" As Tommy launched into details about his wind turbine project, Mark watched a sleek black SUV pass him, its wipers barely visible through the sheets of rain. Something about it tugged at his memory, but he focused on Tommy's voice. "And Mrs. Rodriguez said we might enter it in the state science fair. Dad, are you listening?" "Every word, Bud. That's amazing news." Thunder cracked overhead, and the truck's headlights caught a road sign. "Caution, bridge ices before road." "Dad, what if tomorrow goes bad?" The question hung in the air like the static before lightning. Mark took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "Whatever happens tomorrow, nothing changes what matters. You're my son. I'm your dad. That's forever." A gust of wind buffeted the truck and Mark eased off the accelerator. Through the rain, he could still see the black SUV ahead, its taillights glowing like ember eyes in the gloom. But Mom's lawyers said, "Hey, remember last summer when that storm knocked out the power?" "Yeah." Tommy's voice brightened slightly. "We built a fort in the living room and told ghost stories with the flashlight. And you let me have ice cream for dinner because everything in the freezer was melting." Mark smiled, remembering Tommy's face in the darkness, illuminated by battery-powered lanterns. "That's right. Sometimes the scary things turn into good memories. We just have to stick together." Lightning split the sky, and Mark counted automatically. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, before thunder answered. The storm was getting closer. "Dad?" Tommy's voice had gone quiet again. "Can we build a fort tonight?" "You bet, kiddo. Pizza and fort building. Perfect storm activity." As he approached the bridge, Mark noticed the black SUV had slowed considerably. Through the curtain of rain, he could make out a child's silhouette in the back seat, another parent braving the storm for their kid. The radio cut in with a burst of static. "Flash flood warning now in effect. All drivers advised to exercise. Extreme caution, especially on bridges and low-lying areas. Tommy, I should focus on driving for a few minutes. This rain's getting serious." "Okay. Dad, I love you." "Love you too, buddy. See you soon." The call ended and Mark leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. The bridge loomed ahead, its steel girders dark against the churning sky. The black SUV was barely visible now, more a suggestion of movement than a solid shape. Something felt wrong. The same instinct that told him which support beams needed replacing, which joints wouldn't hold, was screaming at him now. He eased the truck further back from the SUV, watching its taillights dance through the rain. Lightning flashed again, closer this time, illuminating the bridge in stark relief. In that frozen moment, Mark saw everything with terrible clarity. The SUV's wheels hitting a patch of standing water, the slight fishtail, the driver's correction that came a second too late. Time stretched like taffy as the SUV spun once, graceful as a dancer, before slamming into the bridge's guardrail. Metal screamed against metal. The guardrail buckled but held. The SUV rocked once, twice. Then everything happened at once. Another vehicle, a semi trying to stop, its horn a desperate bellow. The SUV spinning again, hitting the rail at a different angle. This time, the metal gave way. Mark was already pulling over, his hand reaching for the door handle before his truck had fully stopped. Through the rain, he saw the SUV's front end dip over the edge of the bridge, its back wheels leaving the pavement as if in slow motion. In the back window, a small face pressed against the glass. A child's hand raised in a wave that might have been goodbye. The SUV disappeared over the edge. Mark's feet moved before his mind could process what he'd just witnessed. The rain hammered against his back as he ran to the bridge's edge, his tool belt still heavy around his waist. 20 feet below, the SUV lay upside down in the shallow creek bed, its frame already wreathed in flames. A scream pierced the storm's roar, high-pitched, terrified, a child's scream. Mark's body was already in motion, scrambling down the muddy embankment. His work boots slipped on wet grass and stones, but he kept his balance, years of construction site experience taking over. The heat from the flames hit him like a wall as he approached the vehicle. The driver's side was crushed against the creek bed. Through the passenger window, he could see a woman slumped forward, seatbelt holding her in place, dark hair curtaining her face. She wasn't moving. In the back seat, a boy about Tommy's age thrashed against his restraints, flames beginning to lick at the ceiling above him. "Hey!" Mark pressed his face close to the cracked rear window. "I'm going to get you out. Cover your face." He yanked his work shirt off, wrapping it around his right arm. With his left hand, he pulled his utility knife from his belt. The back window was safety glass. It would spiderweb but not shatter. He'd need another way in. The flames intensified. The boy's screams grew more desperate. Mark smashed his protected arm against the rear passenger window. Once, twice, 3 times before it finally gave way. Glass rained down as he cleared the frame, cutting his forearms, but he barely felt it. Smoke poured out the opening. "I'm coming in." He could barely see through the thickening smoke. "Keep your face covered." The interior was a maze of twisted metal and broken glass. Mark crawled in head first, the heat searing his exposed skin. The boy's car seat had partially protected him from the initial impact, but now it trapped him as surely as a cage. Mark's fingers found the release button, but it was jammed. The flames were spreading faster now, feeding on spilled gasoline. His lungs burned with each breath. Tommy's face flashed through his mind. His smile this morning over pancakes, his voice on the phone just minutes ago. If this were Tommy. With a roar that was part pain and part desperation, Mark braced himself against the roof of the car and pulled on the car seat with everything he had. Something in his shoulder tore, but the seat gave way. The boy fell into his arms, coughing and trembling. "Hold on to my neck!" Mark backed out of the window, shielding the child's body with his own. His shirt had caught fire, and he could feel blisters forming on his arms, but none of that mattered. Only getting clear of the vehicle mattered. They were 10 feet from the SUV when the gas tank exploded. The force knocked them forward into the mud. Mark curled his body around the boy, protecting him from the wave of heat and debris. For a long moment they lay there in the rain. The boy sobbed against Mark's chest, his fingers clutching Mark's undershirt. Mark stared at the burning vehicle, knowing there was nothing he could have done for the driver. The knowledge sat like lead in his stomach, Sirens wailed in the distance. The boy, he couldn't be more than 7, looked up at Mark with shock-wide eyes. "My mom," he whispered. "She picked me up early. She never picks me up early." "I'm sorry," Mark said, the words ashen in his mouth. "I'm so sorry." Red and blue lights strobed through the rain. Firefighters and paramedics swarmed down the embankment. Someone draped a blanket over Mark's shoulders. Another pair of hands reached for the boy. "Sir, we need to check your burns." Mark barely heard them. His phone was buzzing in his pocket, probably Tommy, wondering where he was. The pizza they'd planned to share, the fort they were going to build, the custody hearing tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. He looked back at the burning SUV one last time, then turned and climbed the embankment. He couldn't stay. Couldn't answer questions. Tommy was waiting, and nothing, not even this, could make him break another promise to his son. Behind him, he heard the boy asking for his mother, his voice receding into the storm. The adrenaline wore off 3 blocks from Tommy's school. Pain blazed through Mark's arms, and his lungs felt scraped raw. He pulled into a gas station, hands shaking as he put the truck in park. In the harsh fluorescent lighting, he finally saw the extent of the damage. His arms were a roadmap of burns and cuts, angry red blisters already forming where the flames had touched his skin. His work shirt was a lost cause, and his undershirt was spotted with blood and soot. The first aid kit under his seat, standard equipment for any carpenter, would have to do. "Dad, where are you?" Tommy's text made Mark's phone glow in. The darkness. He glanced at the time. 6:45, almost an hour late. "On my way, buddy. Got held up with a job. 10 minutes. His fingers trembled as he opened the first aid kit. The antiseptic wipes stung like hell, but he cleaned the worst cuts. Methodically, the way his father had taught him. "Start with what you can fix," the old man used to say. The burns would need real medical attention, but that would have to wait. He pulled a clean shirt from his tool bag, another habit from years on job sites, and eased it over his injuries. The fabric felt like sandpaper against the burns, but at least he looked presentable enough to pick up his son. The school parking lot was nearly empty when he arrived. Tommy sat on the front steps with Mrs. Rodriguez, his backpack clutched to his chest. The sight of him, safe and whole, hit Mark like a physical blow. "Tommy!" He forced his voice to stay steady as he got out of the truck. "I'm so sorry I'm late." "Mr. Anderson." Mrs. Rodriguez stood, concern etching her features. "Is everything all right? You look just a rough day on the job." Mark managed a smile. "Thank you for staying with him." Tommy barreled into him for a hug, and Mark couldn't quite suppress his wince. "Dad, you smell like smoke." "Had to do some demolition work." The lie tasted bitter. "Hey, how about that pizza? I'm starving." Mrs. Rodriguez touched his arm gently, right where a burn lurked under his sleeve, and Mark saw understanding flash across her face. But she said nothing, just squeezed his shoulder and wished them a good evening. In the truck, Tommy chattered about his science presentation, about the questions his classmates had asked, about his plans for improvements to the wind turbine design. Mark focused on his son's voice, using it to drown out the echoes of screaming. Metal and breaking glass. "Dad, your hands are shaking." Mark realized he was gripping the steering wheel too tight. "Just tired, buddy. Big day tomorrow, remember?" They picked up the pizza. "Extra pepperoni, light on the sauce, just like always, Mr. A," said Joey at Antonio's, who'd been serving them every Tuesday for 3 years. The routine felt surreal after what had happened, like watching a familiar movie with the color turned wrong. At home, Mark managed to help Tommy build the promised fort, though every movement sent fire through his arms. They draped sheets over chairs, creating a cave-like space in the living room. Tommy arranged his pillows and switched on the battery-powered lantern. "In case the storm knocks out the power again, Dad." They ate pizza in their fortress, and Mark listened as Tommy detailed his plans for the state science fair. The normalcy of it all felt like a gift and a curse. Somewhere across town, a little boy Tommy's age was learning his mother would never come home. "Dad, you're not eating." Mark looked down at his untouched slice. "Just thinking about tomorrow." Are you scared? The question caught him off guard. He looked at his son, really looked at him, the serious set of his mouth, the way his eyes seemed older than his years. Yeah, buddy, I am. Tommy scooted closer, leaning against Mark's side. Me too. But we've got each other, right? Right. Mark wrapped an arm around his son, ignoring the pain that flared at the movement. Always. Later, after Tommy was asleep, Mark stood in the bathroom, finally letting himself really look at his injuries in the mirror. The burns were worse than he'd first thought. He'd need a doctor, but there was no time before the hearing. His blue suit would cover the worst of it. It had to. He popped 3 ibuprofen and sank onto the couch, his body thrumming with exhaustion and pain. The local news was running a story about the accident. He watched with detached fascination as the camera panned over the scene he'd fled. The mangled guardrail, the scorched creek bed, the somber faces of emergency responders. The identity of the Good Samaritan who rescued the child remains unknown, the reporter said. Witnesses say he disappeared before emergency services arrived. Mark turned off the TV. Tomorrow would come too soon, and with it, the hearing that would determine his future with Tommy. He couldn't let anything. Not pain, not guilt, not the memory of flames, distract him from that. Sleep proved impossible. Mark lay on the couch, every position a new lesson in pain. The burns on his arms had developed into angry welts, and his shoulder throbbed where he'd wrenched it, pulling the car seat free. Local news notifications kept. Lighting up his phone, child rescued from burning vehicle. Mystery hero disappears after highway rescue. Mother dies in bridge accident. He turned the phone face down, but the images wouldn't stop. The boy's face through the smoke. The mother's dark hair covering her face. The flames reflecting in the creek water. Each time he closed his eyes, the scene played again, and each time he wondered, could he have saved them both? At 3 in the morning he heard Tommy's door creak open. "Dad," a whisper in the darkness. "Are you awake?" "Can't sleep, buddy." Tommy padded to the couch, still clutching his stuffed penguin. "I had the dream again, but different this time." Mark shifted, making space despite his protesting muscles. "Different how?" "I was still in the dark water, but—" Tommy crawled under the blanket, careful of Mark's injuries in that intuitive way children have. This time there was someone else there too, another kid. He was scared, but I helped him find the light. Mark's throat tightened. "That sounds like a better dream." "Yeah." Tommy yawned. "Dad, your shirt smells like the time we made s'mores. And you got too close to the campfire. Just a work accident, nothing to worry about. Promise you'll be careful. I don't want to live with Mom because you got hurt." The words hit harder than any physical pain. "I promise, Tommy. I'm not going anywhere." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the storm's distant rumbles. Tommy's breathing gradually steadied into sleep, his small body warm against Mark's side. The digital clock on the cable box blinked 3:47. Mark's mind wandered to the custody hearing. In less than 6 hours, he'd stand before a judge and try to prove he deserved to keep his son. The burns would be hidden under his suit, but would the trauma of the day show on his face? Would Jennifer's lawyers sense his exhaustion and use it against him? His phone buzzed again. A text from Dan Mitchell. "Everything ready for tomorrow? Remember, first impression is crucial with Judge Chen." Judge Chen. The name triggered something in Mark's memory, but pain and fatigue made his thoughts sluggish. He'd appeared before several judges during the divorce proceedings. They all blurred together now. At 4:30, he carefully extracted himself from Tommy's sleeping form and limped to the bathroom. The mirror showed a man he barely recognized. Soot still smudged at his hairline, eyes red from smoke and lack of sleep. He ran the shower as hot as he could stand it, letting the water sluice over his burns. The blue suit hung on the back of his bedroom door, pressed and ready. Jennifer had bought it for him years ago, back when they were trying to impress potential clients for his carpentry business. "You look distinguished," she'd said, straightening his tie at some cocktail party he'd rather have skipped. Now it was his court suit, his armor for battles he'd never wanted to fight. Getting dressed was an exercise in controlled agony. Each button felt like a test of endurance. The suit sleeves scraped against his burns, but at least the dark fabric would hide any blood that might seep through. Tommy was still asleep on the couch when Mark returned to the living room. Dawn was just beginning to grey the windows. In a few hours, they'd sit in a courtroom while strangers debated their future. Jennifer would be there with her corporate salary and her 3-bedroom house in the good school district. Her lawyers would talk about stability and resources and all the things Mark struggled to provide. But they couldn't measure the important things, the fort building and science projects, the midnight talks and morning pancakes. They couldn't quantify a father's love in billable hours or bank statements. Mark sank into his worn armchair, watching his son sleep. The boy who helped others find light in dark waters. The boy who noticed when his dad's hands shook but didn't push for answers. The boy who was worth every burn, every sleepless night, every moment of pain and doubt. Just a few more hours, Mark whispered to himself. Hold it together for a few more hours. Outside, the storm had finally passed. The pre-dawn sky was clearing, stars giving way to the first hint of sunrise. A new day was coming, ready or not. Courtroom 7B smelled of lemon polish and anxiety. Mark sat beside Dan Mitchell, trying to find a position that didn't aggravate his burns. Jennifer and her legal team occupied the other table, her grey pantsuit probably worth more than his monthly income. Tommy sat in the gallery with Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd offered to watch him during the proceedings. All rise, the Honourable Judge Sarah Chen presiding. Mark stood, his injured shoulder protesting. He'd expected Judge Chen to be older, more severe. Instead, she appeared to be in her early 40s, with elegant features and dark hair pulled back in a precise bun. Something about her seemed familiar, but his pain-fogged mind couldn't place it. "Please be seated," Judge Chen said, her voice carrying a slight tremor that seemed out of character for a judge. "Before we begin, I need to—" She stopped, her eyes fixing on Mark with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. "Your Honor?" Jennifer's lawyer stood. "Is everything all right?" Judge Chen gripped her desk, knuckles white against the dark wood. "Mr. Anderson, would you please approach the bench?" Mark glanced at Dan, who looked as confused as he felt. They walked forward together, but Judge Chen held up her hand. "Just Mr. Anderson, please." The walk to the bench felt endless. Each step sent daggers through his burns, but Mark kept his face neutral. Up close, he could see that Judge Chen's eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying recently. "Your Honor, Where did you get those burns, Mr. Anderson?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Now, finally, he really looked, at her face. The elegant features, the dark hair. Yesterday, through the rain and smoke, that hair had been down, covering her face as she slumped forward in the driver's seat. "Oh, God," he whispered. Judge Chen's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "My son," she said, her voice barely audible. "He told the emergency workers that an angel pulled him from the car, that the angel's arms were on fire, but he didn't let go." She looked up, meeting Mark's eyes. "He said the angel smelled like wood shavings and soap." The courtroom had gone completely silent. Mark could feel everyone's eyes on him, could hear Tommy shifting anxiously in his seat. "I didn't know," Mark said. "I couldn't stay. My son was waiting, and the hearing—" He swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry about your wife." Judge Chen closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they shone with tears. "Lisa. Her name was Lisa. She took a shaking breath. "We were married for 8 years. Yesterday was our anniversary. She was picking Michael up early to surprise me with lunch. The weight of it all, the rescue, the sleepless night, the burns, and now this revelation threatened to buckle Mark's knees. "Your Honor, if you need to recuse yourself—" "No!" The word came out sharp, decisive. Judge Chen straightened. In her chair, "Mr. Anderson, would you please roll up your right sleeve?" Mark hesitated, then carefully pushed the suit sleeve up his forearm. The burns were angry and blistered, clear evidence of his passage through the flames. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Dad? Tommy's voice, small but clear. Did you save someone? Before Mark could answer, the courtroom doors burst open. A small figure broke away from the bailiff's grasp and ran forward. A boy about Tommy's age, his face still bearing faint smudges of soot. That's him, the boy, Michael, pointed at Mark. That's the angel who saved me. Judge Chen's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she watched her son run to Mark, wrapping his arms around Mark's waist. The embrace sent pain shooting through his burns, but Mark didn't pull away. "Order!" Judge Chen called, but her voice wavered. "Please, everyone, I need a moment." She stood abruptly and walked to her chambers, her robes swishing against the unpolished floor. The bailiff moved to separate Michael from Mark, but Judge Chen turned at the door. "Let them be," she said softly. "Let them be." The door closed behind her with a quiet click. In the sudden stillness, Mark felt Tommy's small hand slip into his uninjured one. Jennifer sat at her table, tears streaming down her face. Her lawyers shuffled papers aimlessly, all their carefully prepared arguments rendered meaningless by the scene that had just unfolded. Michael looked up at Mark, his eyes wide with remembered fear and fresh hope. "I knew you'd find me again," he whispered. "I knew you were real." In her chambers, Judge Sarah Chen stared at the legal ethics manual open on her desk, its familiar words blurring before her eyes. 20 years on the bench, and nothing had prepared her for this moment. The manual was clear. Any personal connection to a case demanded immediate recusal, but this wasn't just any connection. This man had plunged into flames to save her son. Michael's words echoed in her mind. "The angel wouldn't let go, Mama, even when the fire got bigger." A knock at the door. "Your Honor?" Her clerk, Rachel, entered with a file. "I've pulled the precedents regarding judicial recusal and—" "What did the emergency room report say?" Sarah interrupted. "About Michael's rescuer?" Rachel hesitated. "They never found him. The firefighters reported seeing someone leaving the scene, but—" She placed a different file on the desk. "This is the preliminary accident report. And this," she added a third folder, "is Mr. Anderson's custody case history." Sarah opened the accident report first. The clinical language couldn't disguise the truth. Lisa had died on impact. The flames had come after. If Mark Anderson hadn't been there, hadn't acted. The custody file told its own story. A father working multiple jobs to maintain his visitation rights, late payments but consistent attendance at school events, a small apartment but glowing reports from teachers and counselors. "Rachel, how long have you worked with me?" 6 years, Your Honor. "Have I ever broken protocol?" "Never." Rachel smoothed her skirt. "But you've also never had someone save your child's life the day before a hearing." Sarah picked up a framed photo from her desk. Michael and Lisa at the beach last summer, both laughing as waves crashed behind them. Lisa would know what to do. Lisa always knew. "Bring them back in," Sarah said finally. "All of them." The courtroom fell silent as she returned to the bench. Mark Anderson stood where she'd left him, one arm around his son, the other still comforting Michael. The burns on his forearms were clearly visible now, a roadmap of his courage. "Your Honor," Jennifer's lawyer stood. "Given these extraordinary circumstances, we move for an immediate continuance pending reassignment to—" "Denied." Sarah's voice was steady now. "Mr. Anderson, my clerk informs me you haven't sought medical attention for your injuries." "Why not?" Mark straightened. "The hearing was this morning, Your Honor. I couldn't risk missing it. Even though you were injured saving another child." "He's someone's son, too." Mark looked down at Michael, then at Tommy. "Every child deserves to have someone fight for them." Sarah felt tears threatening again, but forced them back. "Mrs. Anderson, Ms. Pierce." "Now," Jennifer corrected softly. "Ms. Pierce, you've argued that Mr. Anderson's financial constraints and irregular work hours make him an unsuitable primary guardian. Would you like to amend that position?" Jennifer stood slowly. Her makeup was streaked with tears. "Your Honor, She looked at Mark, still protecting both boys. "I was wrong about so many things." "Dad?" Tommy's voice carried in the quiet courtroom. Are you really an angel? A ripple of gentle laughter broke the tension. Mark knelt between the two boys, wincing at the movement. No, buddy, I just did what any dad would do. But you got hurt, Michael touched Mark's arm gently, because of me. Hey, no. Mark's voice was firm. This isn't your fault. Sometimes we get hurt helping others, but that doesn't make it wrong. Right, Your Honor? Sarah felt the weight of her position, of protocol and precedent pressing down on her, but she also saw something else. A father who understood that love sometimes meant walking through fire. Mr. Anderson is correct. She picked up her gavel. While the court acknowledges the unique circumstances of this hearing, I find myself more qualified to rule on this case now than ever before. I have seen firsthand the character of the man before us. Jennifer's lawyers exchanged glances, but remained silent. The law requires me to act in the best interest of the child, Sarah continued. It does not, however, require me to ignore clear evidence of parental dedication and sacrifice, even when that evidence presents itself in unexpected ways. She looked at Lisa's empty chair in the gallery, feeling her lost wife's presence like a hand on her shoulder. Some decisions transcended protocol. Michael, she said gently, would you please return to your seat? The court needs to finish its business. Then perhaps, she glanced at Mark, who nodded understanding, we can all talk more about yesterday. As Michael reluctantly pulled away from Mark, Sarah saw Tommy squeeze his father's hand. The gesture contained all the evidence she needed to make her ruling. As the courtroom settled, Sarah found her thoughts drifting to a photograph hidden in her desk drawer. Taken 15 years ago, it showed two young women in judicial robes, fresh from their swearing-in ceremony. Lisa's smile was radiant as she held up their marriage license alongside their judicial credentials. Love and justice, she'd joked. We're cornering the market. They hadn't known then what lay ahead. The years of fertility treatments, the failed adoptions, the custody battles that seemed designed to break their spirit. Same-sex couples faced extra scrutiny, extra hurdles, extra proof that they deserved a family. Your Honor, Dan Mitchell's voice pulled her back. Would you like us to proceed with opening statements? Sarah glanced at the old family photo on her bench, the one she kept as a reminder that every case affected real lives. Lisa had taken it. Their first successful fostering placement, a teenage girl named Maya. They'd fought for months to adopt her, only to lose her to a distant relative who'd suddenly appeared. No opening statements needed. Sarah squared her shoulders. This court has reviewed the file extensively. Ms. Pierce, your original petition cited concerns about Mr. Anderson's financial stability and work schedule. Could you elaborate on those concerns? Jennifer stood, but her usual confidence had evaporated. Your Honor, She looked at Mark, still bearing the evidence of his courage on his burned arms. I was afraid. Tommy was struggling in school, and Mark was always taking odd jobs, moving from project to project. I thought structure and money would fix everything. And now I see what Lisa always told me. Jennifer's voice broke slightly. That love shows itself in the moments that matter most. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. Lisa had said those exact words the night they lost Maya, as they sat in their empty house, surrounded by the toys and clothes they'd bought with such hope. Mr. Anderson, Sarah turned to Mark. This court notes that while your child support payments have occasionally been late, you've maintained consistent involvement in your son's education and development. Could you describe your typical daily routine with Tommy? Mark straightened. Despite his obvious pain, we're up at 5:45. I help him with homework over breakfast. If I have an early job, Mrs. Rodriguez, Tommy's teacher, lets him come to classroom early. I schedule my jobs around his science club and doctor appointments. Every night, we have dinner together and talk about our day. Even when you're behind on payments, especially then. Mark's voice was firm. Tommy needs to know that some things never change, no matter what. Sarah felt Lisa's presence so strongly, she almost expected to see her standing in the gallery. Lisa, who taught her that justice wasn't just about following rules, it was about recognizing love in all its forms. Your Honor, Jennifer's lawyer interjected. While Mr. Anderson's actions yesterday were undoubtedly heroic, one incident shouldn't overshadow the broader pattern of... Pattern? Sarah cut him off. Yes, let's discuss patterns. Mr. Anderson has shown a pattern of putting children's needs first, not just his own child's, but any child in danger. He has shown a pattern of sacrifice, working multiple jobs to stay present in his son's life. And yesterday, he demonstrated that when faced with a choice between personal safety and saving a child, he doesn't hesitate. She pulled out the photo of Maya, worn at the edges from years of handling. This court has seen too many cases where parents fight for custody as if it were a prize to be won, rather than a sacred responsibility to be earned. Mr. Anderson, your actions remind us what that responsibility truly means. Tommy had crept closer to his father's side. Michael, from his seat in the gallery, watched with intense interest. Two boys, Sarah realized, who had seen firsthand the lengths a parent would go to protect a child. Ms. Pierce, Sarah continued, would you say Tommy has shown improvement? In school recently? Jennifer nodded. His grades are the best they've ever been. His science project. She smiled despite her tears. Mark helped him build a working wind turbine. Sarah thought of Lisa's last words to Maya. Family isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about perfect love. She looked at Mark Anderson, his burned arms wrapped protectively around his son, and knew what her wife would say about this case. Some choices transcended protocol. Some moments demanded that justice and love speak with the same voice. The first reporter arrived during the morning recess. By lunch, a small crowd had gathered outside the courthouse, their cameras and microphones ready to capture what had become the day's biggest story. Hero father faces judge whose son he saved. Sarah watched from her chamber window as news vans lined the street. Her clerk, Rachel, entered with a stack of newspapers, their headlines screaming for attention. Custody battle turns to divine intervention. Burned hero faces justice. Father risks all in dramatic rescue. The press office is getting flooded with calls, Rachel said. And this just went viral. She held up her phone, showing a sketch artist's rendering of the moment Michael had run to Mark in the courtroom. The image had already garnered thousands of shares. Have you seen the comments? Rachel scrolled through her phone. This is what real fatherhood looks like. Some heroes don't wear capes, they wear work boots and burn scars. She paused. Your Honor, how do you want to handle this? Sarah touched the wedding ring she still wore. What would Lisa say about all this attention? Probably that justice shouldn't need an audience. Rachel smiled sadly. She always did cut right to the heart of things. In the courthouse cafeteria, Mark sat with Tommy and Michael, trying to shield both boys from the growing chaos. His burns had begun to throb again, but he focused on helping Michael with his lunch, cutting his sandwich into triangles, just as he'd seen Judge Chen do earlier. Dad? Tommy pushed his apple slices around his plate. Are those people outside? Because of you. Before Mark could answer, Jennifer appeared at their table. She'd been crying again, her mascara slightly smudged. The reporters want statements from both of us. No. Mark's response was immediate. Tommy doesn't need that circus, neither does Michael. Jennifer sat down, her usual corporate poise cracking. You know what's crazy? I've spent 3 years trying to prove you're not good enough, and in one day you proved me more wrong than I ever imagined possible. Ms. Pierce? Michael looked up from his sandwich. Are you Tommy's mom? Yes, sweetheart. My mom, my other mom. She used to say that sometimes the biggest love comes in the smallest moments. He glanced at Mark. Like when someone cuts. Your sandwich just right, even though their arms hurt. Jennifer's breath caught. Tommy reached across the table and took her hand. Mom, is Dad in trouble because he helped Michael? No, honey. Jennifer squeezed his hand. I think your dad just helped us all see something we should have seen a long time ago. Outside the cafeteria windows, reporters pressed their cameras against the glass. Mark shifted to block their view of the boys, his protective instinct automatic now. A security guard approached their table. Judge Chen asked me to show you to her private conference room. There's a back way, away from the media." As they walked through the quiet corridors, Mark noticed Tommy and Michael whispering together. He caught fragments. "Your mom seems nice, and Dad's the bravest, and maybe we can all have pizza sometime." The conference room offered sanctuary from the circus outside. Judge Chen stood as they entered, her judicial robe draped over a chair. Without it, she looked smaller, more vulnerable, a mother who had almost lost everything. "I apologize for the media attention," she said. "I never intended—" "Neither did I." Mark helped the boys settle on a leather sofa. "I just saw a car on fire and a kid who needed help." Sarah smiled softly. Lisa would have loved that answer. She always said, "The purest actions come without calculation." Through the walls, they could hear the muffled excitement of the press corps. Someone had leaked the connection between the highway rescue and the custody hearing. The story was exploding across social media, with hashtags and video clips and endless speculation. But in this quiet room, something simpler and more profound was taking shape. Tommy showed Michael his science fair photos, while Jennifer and Mark sat together, talking quietly about school schedules and shared holidays. Judge Chen watched it all, seeing echoes of her own lost chances at family, and the unexpected ways love could build new bridges. "Your Honor?" Michael tugged at her sleeve. "Can we show Tommy the picture of you and Mom at the beach? The one where you're both laughing?" Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. I think it's time for Tommy to know all about your mom. She would have loved this moment." Outside, the media storm raged on, but within these walls, justice and healing were finding their own quiet path forward. The courthouse security cameras would later capture the moment everything changed. It happened during the afternoon session, as Judge Chen was reviewing the final documentation. The pain medication the court nurse had insisted on giving Mark had begun to wear off, and his burns were screaming for attention. "Your Honor," Jennifer's lawyer stood, papers rustling. "While we acknowledge Mr. Anderson's heroic actions, we must return to the fundamental questions of financial stability." And "No!" Tommy's voice cut through the formal atmosphere like a thunderclap. He broke away from Mrs. Rodriguez, running to his father's side. "You don't understand. You don't know anything." "Tommy," Mark started, but his son wasn't finished. "Dad missed one payment one, because he was buying my inhaler when the insurance wouldn't. He works all the time, but he never misses my science club. Never. And when I'm sick, he sleeps in the chair by my bed, even though it hurts his back. And then—" Tommy was crying now, his small body shaking. "And he runs into burning cars to save people because that's who he is. He saves people." The courtroom fell silent. Mark pulled Tommy close, ignoring the fire that shot through his burned arms at the contact. "Shh, buddy. It's okay." "No, it's not okay." Tommy pulled back, looking at his mother. "Mom, you have a big house and better furniture and everything's always clean and perfect. But Dad has love, so much love it burns him, and he doesn't even care that it hurts." Jennifer stood slowly, her face ashen. "Tommy, I heard you," he continued, his voice breaking, "on the phone with Aunt Claire. You said Dad would never be able to provide the life I deserve. But what about the life I want? What about what I need?" Judge Chen made no move to restore order. Instead, she reached for the photo of Lisa, her fingers tracing the familiar smile. "The life you deserve," she said softly, "and the life you need. Sometimes they're not the same thing, are they, Tommy?" "No, Your Honor." Tommy straightened, suddenly looking older than his years. "Sometimes what you deserve is someone who'll walk through fire for you, even if they live in a small apartment, even if they're not perfect." Michael slipped away from the bailiff and joined Tommy by Mark's side. "My mom, my other mom, she used to say that love isn't about deserving, it's about belonging." Jennifer moved forward, tears streaming down her face. She knelt before Tommy, taking his small hands in hers. "Oh, baby, when did you get so wise? And when did I get so foolish?" "Miss Pierce," Judge Chen's voice was gentle, "would you like to amend your petition?" Jennifer looked up at Mark, who still had one arm around each boy, despite the visible pain it caused him. Yes, Your Honor, I would. I've been so wrong. The security footage showed what happened next. Jennifer rising, turning to her lawyers, and saying words that made them start shuffling papers frantically. But it couldn't capture the weight lifting from Tommy's shoulders, or the way Mark's eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. Judge Chen watched it all, remembering another courtroom, another case. Lisa had been the judge then, overseeing their own adoption petition for Maya. Love, she'd written in her final ruling, must be measured not by the comfort it provides, but by the sacrifices it inspires. Your Honor? Mark's voice was rough with emotion. I know this isn't protocol, but could I have a moment to take care of something? Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. She watched as Mark knelt between the two boys, wincing but determined. Tommy, remember what we talked about? About sometimes getting hurt when you help others? Tommy nodded, his hand gentle on his father's injured arm. Well, sometimes helping others gives you something back. Something better than not being hurt. Mark looked at Michael, then back at his son. Sometimes it gives you new family. Like Michael? Tommy asked. Like Michael. And Judge Chen. And even your mom, in a new way. Family isn't always about who you're born to. Sometimes it's about who you choose to walk through fire for. Jennifer covered her mouth, stifling a sob. Judge Chen reached for her water glass, but her hand was trembling too hard to lift it. In the gallery, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered to Rachel, "In 20 years of teaching, I've never seen anything like this." Rachel smiled through her tears. "In 6 years of court proceedings, neither have I." The security cameras continued their silent vigil, recording the moment when justice and love found their meeting point. But some things couldn't be captured on film. The healing of old wounds, the birth of new understanding, and the quiet triumph of a father's unwavering love. The afternoon sun slanted through the high courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the worn floor of courtroom 7B. Judge Sarah Chen sat at her bench. The court transcript opened before her, but her eyes were fixed on the photograph of Lisa she'd moved from her chambers. "Before I deliver my ruling," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it, "I want to share something my late wife once wrote in a similar case. The measure of a parent," she read from a worn notebook, "is not found in their bank statements or the size of their home. It is found in the moments when no one is watching, in the quiet sacrifices that leave scars both seen and unseen." She looked up, meeting Mark's eyes. "Mr. Anderson, yesterday you walked through fire to save my son. You didn't know who he was. You didn't know I would be presiding over your custody hearing. You simply saw a child in danger and acted." Mark shifted in his chair, the movement causing him to wince. The court nurse had wanted to take him to the hospital, but he'd refused to leave until the hearing was complete. "Your Honor," Jennifer stood, her voice thick with emotion, "with the court's permission, I'd like to withdraw my petition for full custody." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Chen raised her hand for silence. "Ms. Pierce, are you certain?" "Yes, Your Honor." Jennifer turned to face Mark. "In fact, I'd like to propose a new arrangement. One that puts Tommy's needs first, all of his needs, not just the material ones." Sarah felt Lisa's presence beside her, almost as tangible as the gavel beneath her hand. "Please proceed. I'm requesting a modification to share legal and physical custody equally with Mr. Anderson." Furthermore, Jennifer took a deep breath. "I'd like the record to show that I'm offering to assist with Tommy's medical expenses and to contribute to a college fund, regardless of the custody arrangement." Mark started to protest, but Jennifer held up her hand. "Not because you need help, Mark, because Tommy deserves to have both parents working together instead of against each other. Because sometimes love means swallowing your pride and admitting you were wrong." Tommy, who had been sitting quietly between Michael and Mrs. Rodriguez, broke into a wide smile. "Really, Mom? You and Dad both?" "Really, sweetheart." Jennifer wiped her eyes. "If that's okay with your father." Judge Chen watched as Mark struggled to find words. Finally, he managed, "Tommy, what do you think, buddy?" "I think—" Tommy looked between his parents, then at Michael, who gave him an encouraging nod. "I think love is better when it's bigger, when it has room for everyone." Sarah picked up her gavel, its familiar weight grounding her. "Then let me make this official. But first," she turned to her son, "Michael, would you join me up here?" Michael climbed the steps to the bench, his small face solemn. Sarah pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, remembering how close she'd come to losing him. "The court finds as follows," she began, one arm still around Michael. "Joint legal and physical custody is awarded to both parents, with equal time sharing. Ms. Pierce's offer of medical and educational support is entered into the record." But more importantly, she looked down at her son, then at Tommy, seeing the same resilience in both boys' faces. "This court finds that Mr. Mark Anderson has demonstrated, through both ordinary and extraordinary actions, the highest qualities of parenthood. His commitment to his son's welfare extends beyond material concerns to encompass the very essence of what it means to be a father." She paused, gathering herself. "Let the record show that this ruling is made not in spite of protocol, but because of it. The law requires us to act in the best interest of the child. Today, we have seen that best interest manifested in burned arms and unwavering love, in a mother's recognition of truth, and in a child's wisdom about what really matters." Michael tugged at her robe. "Can I say something, Mama?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson," Michael said clearly, "for not letting go even when it hurt. And Tommy," he smiled at his new friend, "thank you for sharing your dad with me." Mark stood, his voice rough with emotion. "Your Honor, Judge Chen, Sarah, thank you isn't enough, but—" "No," she cut him off gently. "Thank you isn't enough, but maybe this is. Michael has therapy on Thursdays. Perhaps Tommy would like to join him sometimes, and afterward—" She smiled through her tears. "I make a pretty good pizza." "With extra cheese," both boys asked simultaneously, then broke into giggles. "Court is adjourned," Sarah declared, bringing down her gavel. "But this family, all of us, is just beginning." As the afternoon sun painted the courtroom in shades of gold, two boys ran to hug their fathers, one with burned arms that would heal, one whose arms would never hold him again. And in that moment, witnessed by the living and watched over by the dead, justice and love spoke as one voice. The emergency room doctor shook her head as she examined Mark's burns. "You should have come in yesterday. These are second-degree burns, Mr. Anderson. You're lucky they're not infected." Mark sat on the examination table, Tommy dozing in a chair nearby. The adrenaline had finally worn off, leaving him drained but peaceful. Had something more important to take care of. "Yes, we saw the news." The doctor's hands were gentle as she applied antibiotic cream. "My daughter showed me the video. Mom, look, a real superhero." Through the partially open door, Mark could hear Michael's voice in the hallway, explaining to Judge Chen, Sarah, she'd asked him to call her, about Tommy's science project. The boy hadn't wanted to leave Mark's side until he knew he'd be okay. A nurse entered with a letter. "This came for you, Mr. Anderson. The boy's mother wrote it before—" She trailed off, handing him an envelope. Mark's hands trembled as he opened it. The handwriting was elegant, hurried. "To my son's guardian angel. If you're reading this, I didn't make it, but Michael did. I don't know who you are, but I saw you coming through the flames. In that moment, I knew Michael would be safe, and I could let go. Sarah will need help learning to live without me. She's stronger than she knows, but she forgets to eat when she's stressed, and she works too hard, and sometimes she needs reminding that it's okay to laugh. Michael will need someone to teach him that love is stronger than loss. Thank you for giving them a chance to learn these things together. With eternal gratitude, Lisa Chen." Mark folded the letter carefully, his vision blurring. Through the window, he could see Jennifer talking with Sarah in the parking lot, their heads close together, sharing what looked like pictures on Jennifer's phone. "Dad," Tommy stirred in his chair. Are you crying? Happy tears, buddy. Mark wiped his eyes. Sometimes good things can come from hard times. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Michael burst in, waving a paper. Look what Tommy's mom gave me. Pictures of the wind turbine project. Can we build one too, please? Sarah followed, carrying coffee. I told him we should wait until your arms heal, but we can start planning now, Mark said. Tommy, want to show Michael your design notes? As the boys huddled over Tommy's worn notebook, Sarah sat beside Mark's examination table. Lisa's letter, she said softly. She always knew what needed to be said. She was right about you being strong. Sarah's smile was sad but genuine. I had to be. Even before this, being a same-sex couple, adopting Michael, facing down prejudice in the legal system. Lisa taught me that strength isn't about not needing help. It's about knowing when to accept it. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, holding a large bag. The gift shop had supplies for fort building. She looked at Mark. I remember how much Tommy loves forts when he's worried. The doctor returned with discharge papers and prescriptions. Mr. Anderson needs rest. These burns will take weeks to heal properly. He can stay with us, Sarah said suddenly. We have a guest room, and it would help Michael to have him close. And I can take Tommy to school this week, Jennifer added. My meetings can be rescheduled. Mark looked at their faces. His ex-wife, the judge whose son he'd saved, the two boys already planning their next project together. An unlikely family, formed in fire and justice. Thank you, he said simply. All of you. Later, as they helped. Mark to Sarah's car, Tommy grabbed his father's hand. Dad, remember when you said sometimes helping others gives you something back? Yeah, buddy. I get it now. He looked at Michael, then at Sarah and Jennifer. Sometimes it gives you more family. Sarah touched the letter in her pocket, feeling Lisa's presence in the gentle evening air. Your father's a wise man, Tommy. Nah, Mark said, watching Michael demonstrate his ideas for wind turbine improvements, just lucky enough to learn what matters most. Jennifer helped Tommy with his seatbelt, then squeezed Mark's uninjured shoulder. We all are. As they drove away from the hospital, Mark saw the headlines on a newspaper stand, Hero Father Finds Justice. But the real story, he knew, wasn't about heroism or justice. It was about how love, like fire, could destroy or transform. And sometimes, out of the ashes, it could build something stronger than what came before. 2 weeks after the hearing, Mark stood in Sarah's backyard, supervising as Tommy and Michael arranged lumber for their joint wind turbine project. His burns were healing, the angry red fading to pink, though the doctor said some scarring was inevitable. Dad, is this piece long enough for the base? Tommy held up a cedar plank, his face serious with concentration. Before Mark could answer, Michael chimed in. Mom, Judge Chen, Sarah said we could use her garden shed if we need more space. Just Sarah is fine, sweetheart, Sarah called from the patio where she was grilling burgers. The boys had insisted on an outdoor dinner to celebrate Mark's first day back at work. Mark watched as the boys measured and remeasured the wood, consulting Tommy's original design notes. They'd modified the plans to make it a two-person project, adding what Michael called improvements, and Tommy termed scientific upgrades. They're good for each other, Jennifer said, appearing beside him with a glass of lemonade. She'd brought over Tommy's old tool belt, adjusted to fit Michael's smaller frame. Tommy's teaching Michael about engineering, and Michael's helping Tommy talk about his feelings more. Mark sipped the lemonade, remembering late-night conversations with Sarah over the past 2 weeks. They'd shared stories about their children, their losses, their hopes. She told him about Lisa's passion for justice, about their struggle to adopt Michael, about the nights she still woke up reaching for her wife. How's the new apartment hunting going? Jennifer asked, watching the boys debate the optimal angle. For the turbine blades, found a 3-bedroom a few blocks from here. Sarah helped with the security deposit. He smiled, said it was either that or listen to Tommy and Michael complain about being too far apart. They're already inseparable. Jennifer's voice held wonder. Like brothers. They are brothers, Sarah said, joining them. Maybe not by blood, but by something just as strong. She touched the burns on Mark's arms gently, by choice, by love. The sound of a car door made them all turn. Mrs. Rodriguez walked through the side gate, carrying a large cake box. "I hope I'm not too late. The faculty meeting ran long, and I wanted to finish Tommy and Michael's grade reports." "Mrs. R." Both boys shouted, running to hug their teacher. "Perfect timing," Sarah said, flipping the burgers. "And those reports?" Mrs. Rodriguez beamed. "Straight A's for both of them. Their joint presentation on renewable energy was the best in the class." Mark watched as Tommy showed Michael how to adjust his tool belt, the same way Mark had taught Tommy years ago. The garden would soon host 2 wind turbines, one for each boys' room, they'd insisted, but it was already growing something more valuable, a family that defied conventional boundaries. "Mark," Sarah handed him a plate, "would you do the honors? Lisa always said grace before special meals, and this feels special," Jennifer finished. "It does." They gathered around the patio table, the judge, the carpenter, the corporate executive, the teacher, and 2 boys who'd found brotherhood in the aftermath of tragedy. Mark looked at their expectant faces, feeling the weight of the moment. "I'm not great with words," he began, "but I know what Lisa wrote in her letter, about love being stronger than loss. Looking at all of us here, I think she was right." "She usually was," Sarah said softly. "So maybe grace isn't about fancy words. Maybe it's about being grateful for second chances, for burned arms that heal, for wind turbines and tool belts and boys who teach us what family really means." Tommy reached for Michael's hand under the table. "And for brothers you didn't know you needed, especially those," Mark agreed. Michael looked up at Sarah. "Mum would have loved this, wouldn't she?" "Oh, yes." Sarah blinked back tears. "She would have been right here, probably arguing with Mark about the proper angle for solar panels." 33 degrees in this latitude," Mark said automatically, then laughed as Sarah rolled her eyes. "Now you sound like Lisa." As they began passing dishes, Mark caught Jennifer's eye. She nodded slightly, understanding passing between them. They'd needed this too, not just their sons, but all of them. A chance to redefine family, to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. The wind picked up, rustling through the garden where 2 turbines would soon stand. Mark thought he felt something else too, a presence, a blessing, a gentle reminder that love, like the wind, could power things unseen, but essential. "Dad?" Tommy's voice pulled him back. "Can we start building after dinner?" Mark looked at his healing arms, at Sarah's encouraging smile, at Jennifer's nod. "Yeah, buddy, we can start building right now." The elementary school auditorium buzzed with excitement before the winter science fair. 2 wind turbines stood side by side on the display table, their blades spinning lazily in the artificial breeze from a carefully placed fan. Tommy and Michael stood before their project, practicing their presentation one last time. "The adjustable blade pitch allows for optimal energy capture," Tommy explained to an imaginary audience. "And the dual generator system means it can power 2 houses at once," Michael added proudly, "just like our family." Mark smiled at the analogy as he helped Sarah hang the project backdrop. His arms had healed well, though the scars still drew curious glances. These days he wore them like medals, not of heroism, but of the moment their unusual family was born. "They're going to win," Jennifer whispered, adjusting Tommy's collar. She'd left work early, still in her business suit, but she'd swapped her heels for comfortable flats. "Look how confident they are." Sarah touched the locket she wore, the one containing Lisa's picture. "They already have." The past 6 months had settled into a rhythm none of them could have predicted. Mark's new apartment, just 3 blocks from Sarah's house, had become a second workshop for the boys' projects. Jennifer's corporate connections had secured funding for the school's new STEM program. Sarah had gradually returned to work, though she still kept Lisa's letter in her chambers. "Dad!" Tommy called. "People are coming in!" Parents and students filed into the auditorium. Mark spotted Mrs. Rodriguez directing traffic, wearing a T-shirt that read, "Science Rules." She'd been instrumental in helping Tommy and Michael develop their presentation. "Ready, scientists?" Sarah straightened Michael's tie. Lisa's father had sent it along with a note about how proud his daughter would have been. "Ready?" both boys chorused. The judges made their way around the room, stopping at each project. When they reached the wind turbine display, Tommy and Michael launched into their rehearsed presentation. But it was their unscripted moments that caught everyone's attention. "See, when you adjust this part," Tommy demonstrated, "it's like how our family adjusted. Different pieces working together." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "And the support structure," he pointed to the base. "That's like our parents. Mr. Anderson, designed it based on his construction experience. And Mom, Judge Chen, helped us with the environmental impact research," Tommy added. "And my mom helped us make our presentation look professional." The judges exchanged glances, clearly impressed by more than just the technical aspects of the project. "Young men," one judge asked, "what inspired you to work on this together?" The boys looked at each other, then at their parents. Michael spoke first. "My other mum, she always said that love is like renewable energy. The more you share it, the more it grows. And my dad taught me that sometimes the strongest things are built after something breaks," Tommy added, touching Mark's scarred arm gently. Sarah gripped Jennifer's hand as the judges made notes. Mark felt a familiar tightness in his throat. Later, after the boys had accepted their first-place ribbon, "See, I told you they'd win," Jennifer had whispered. The families gathered at Sarah's house for celebration pizza. The wind turbines had been carefully transported to the garden, where they would join their larger counterparts. "To the scientists!" Mark raised his glass. "To family," Michael countered, pizza sauce on his chin. "To both," Sarah said softly, watching as Tommy helped Michael adjust his turbine's angle for maximum efficiency. The doorbell rang, Mrs. Rodriguez joining them for dessert, carrying her traditional celebration cake. She'd become a regular at their shared family dinners, bringing not just food, but a grounding presence that helped them all navigate their unique situation. "You know," she said, setting down the cake, "in 25 years of teaching, I've never seen anything quite like this." "Like what?" Jennifer asked, though they all knew. "Like two boys who lost something important, finding something even bigger. Like 4 adults putting aside everything to build something new," she smiled. "Like love doing what love does best, growing beyond boundaries." Mark watched as Tommy and Michael disappeared into the garden, no doubt planning their next project. The sun was setting, catching the spinning turbine blades and throwing dancing shadows across the yard. Somewhere, he thought, Lisa was watching too, seeing how her final letter had helped build this moment. "They're already talking about their next invention," Sarah said, following his gaze. "Something about a solar-powered treehouse," Jennifer added. Mark grinned. "Good thing I know a carpenter." The wind picked up, setting both turbines spinning faster, their synchronized movement like a dance, like a family finding its rhythm, like love proving once again that it could power anything, even miracles. The invitation arrived on a crisp spring morning, crafted in Tommy and Michael's careful handwriting. "You are invited to the first annual Anderson Chen family celebration. Come see our new treehouse and help us remember Mom, Lisa. There will be cake and memories and science experiments. Saturday at 2 p.m. Mark found Sarah in her garden, already preparing for the event. The boys' wind turbines spun steadily nearby, powering the lights they'd installed along the garden path. "Need help with those chairs?" he asked, noting how she'd paused before Lisa's favorite rosebush. "Just thinking," she said, touching a bloom. Lisa loved parties. She would have gotten such a kick out of the boys planning this. The past year had changed them all. Mark's construction business had grown, thanks in part to Jennifer's networking. He'd hired 2 employees and was teaching them his restoration techniques. Sarah had started a support group for blended families at the courthouse. And Jennifer had surprised everyone by beginning law school part-time, inspired by their journey through the legal system. But the biggest changes were in the boys. Tommy and Michael had become inseparable, their bond transcending the circumstances that brought them together. They spent weekends between Mark's apartment and Sarah's house, turning both spaces into workshops for their endless projects. "Dad!" Tommy's voice carried from the new treehouse. "We need your expert opinion!" Mark climbed the ladder, his healed arms strong and sure. The treehouse was their masterpiece. Solar-powered lights, a pulley system for supplies, and a memorial corner where Michael had carefully placed his favorite picture of Lisa. "What's up, scientists?" "We want to add a weather station," Michael explained, pointing to his detailed drawings, "for monitoring wind patterns. And Mom, Sarah, said we could link it to her garden irrigation system," Tommy added. Mark examined their plans, drawn in two distinct handwriting styles that flowed together seamlessly. "Looks good. But what's this part?" "That's the memory meter," Michael said softly. "It measures how much we miss Mom by tracking the wind speed. She always said she'd be in the wind." Tommy put his arm around Michael. "And when the wind is strong, we know she's checking on us." Mark blinked back tears. Below, he could hear Jennifer arriving, talking with Sarah about the cake she'd brought. The two women had developed their own unique friendship, bound by their shared love for the boys and their commitment to this unconventional family. Mrs. Rodriguez's car pulled up next, her arms full of science magazines for the boys. She'd become Aunt Rosa somewhere along the way, another thread in their expanding family tapestry. "Boys," Sarah called, "your guests will be here soon." They scrambled down the ladder, excited to share their creation. Mark followed more slowly, taking in the scene. Sarah arranging flowers in Lisa's favorite vase, Jennifer setting up the food table, Mrs. Rodriguez helping the boys with their demonstration materials. The garden filled with people touched by their story. Lisa's parents arrived, bringing photo albums and memories. Mark's employees came with their families, drawn by the boys' enthusiasm for construction. Even Dan Mitchell, the lawyer from the custody hearing, stopped by with his grandchildren. As Tommy and Michael led tours of their treehouse, Mark found himself standing between Sarah and Jennifer, watching their sons shine. "Remember when we thought we had to fight over him?" Jennifer murmured. "Remember when I thought I had to choose between protocol and humanity?" Sarah added. Mark touched the scars on his arms, now badges of the moment their family began. "Remember when we thought we knew what family looked like?" The boys had set up a presentation area beneath the treehouse. Michael stood tall, wearing Lisa's tie. "Again, welcome to our celebration. We're here because 1 year ago, something sad and something amazing happened on the same day." Tommy joined him. "We learned that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose. It's who walks through fire for you, and who helps you build wind turbines, and who makes sure you know you're loved. It's moms and dads who learn new ways to share," Michael continued. "It's judges who remember to be human first. It's teachers who become aunts, and friends who become brothers. And sometimes," Tommy added, looking at Lisa's picture, "it's the people who have to leave us early, but who teach us how to love bigger before they go." The wind picked up, setting the turbines spinning, making the treehouse lights dance. Sarah reached for Lisa's locket. Jennifer wiped her eyes, and Mark felt that familiar presence, love expanding, family growing, healing happening in ways none of them could have imagined. 1 year to the day after the accident, Mark stood at the bridge where everything had changed. The guardrail had been repaired, the scorch marks long since washed away by rain, but the memory remained, etched in his scars and in the family that had grown from that moment. Tommy and Michael insisted on coming with him, standing on either side, their hands in his as they looked down at the creek bed below. "Does it look different than you remember?" Michael asked softly. "Everything's different," Mark replied. "And that's okay." Sarah joined them, placing a bouquet of Lisa's favorite roses near the bridge. Jennifer stood close by, her law books in the car. She'd have to study later for her evening class. Mrs. Rodriguez had brought a thermos of hot chocolate, passing out cups to ward off the spring chill. "Mom used to say that endings are just beginnings in disguise," Michael said, leaning against Sarah. "She was right," Sarah answered, touching her locket. "Look at us, all of us. We're proof of that." Tommy studied the repaired guardrail. "Dad, do you ever regret running into the fire?" Mark looked at his son, at both his sons, really, and at the family they'd built together. Sarah, who'd found the strength to open her heart again. Jennifer, who'd learned that letting go sometimes meant holding on differently. Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd helped two boys turn tragedy into triumph. "Not for a second, buddy. Some things are worth the burns." The wind picked up, catching the roses and scattering petals across the bridge. The boys claimed it was Lisa, checking on them one last time. Mark thought they might be right. "Ready to go home?" Sarah asked. "The wind turbines won't monitor themselves. And we have that solar panel to install," Jennifer added. "And science. And projects to grade." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. The boys ran ahead to the car, already planning their next invention. Mark lingered for a moment, looking at the spot where he'd made the choice that changed everything. He thought about what the judge had said that day in court, that love spoke with justice's voice. But it was more than that. Love spoke in burned arms and midnight conversations, in shared custody and science fairs, in brothers found through fire and family built beyond blood. It spoke in wind turbines spinning in sync, in a judge's healing heart, in a mother learning to share, in a teacher becoming aunt and confidant. Love spoke in the way Tommy and Michael signed their school papers now, the Anderson Chen brothers. Sarah touched his arm gently. "Coming?" Mark nodded, turning away from the bridge. Behind them lay the moment that had started it all. Ahead lay everything they'd built from it, their strange, wonderful, perfectly imperfect family. "Yeah," he said, "let's go home." The wind followed them back, carrying the scent of roses and the sound of children's laughter, reminding them that sometimes the best families aren't born. They're built, one choice at a time, through fire and love and justice, together.